Hi, everyone. Looks like everybody's filling in here. Welcome. My name is Jo Easton. I'm Director of Audience at the Bangor Daily News. I don't get to host these events all that often, and I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion. I trust that you all brought some really good questions. For those of you in the audience tonight who are subscribers or donors, thank you for your support. Local journalism is a public good, and you are serving your community by supporting this newspaper. Thank you. We'd like to welcome all of you who may be joining a BDN Events online meetup for the first time. If local journalism is important to you, please purchase a subscription to the Bangor Daily News. All right, I'm done plugging us. We would like to thank our tourmaline sponsor for this event, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, and our co-presenter, Friends of Katahdin Woods and Waters. As a reminder, this event is being recorded. If you have questions for our guests, please use the chat function to ask your question down at the bottom, and I will post them on your behalf. Our events producer, Alyssa Young, will be working behind the scenes to keep things running smoothly. Tonight, we get an hour or so to talk about the first 5 years of Katahdin Woods and Waters and the ongoing presence and use of the land that makes up the monument. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to call your attention to a poll that we're putting up in Zoom about how familiar you are with the park. Alyssa should, oh, there it is. So there's the poll popped up, and you should be able to find it either at the bottom of your screen or in front of everything. We'll leave it open for a few minutes. Please just take a moment to answer. While you guys are answering the poll, I'll introduce our guests. So joining me tonight are Tim Hudson, Park Superintendent, Andrew Bossie, Executive Director of Friends of Katahdin Woods and Waters, and Lindsay Hill Downing, owner of Mount Chase Lodge. Let's do a round of introductions to get us started. Tim, can you lead us off?
I can. Can you hear me? Did I messed up my mute button anywhere? Oh,
You're good.
I'm Tim Hudson. I'm the superintendent of the monument. I've been there since right before the monument started, day one. So I've seen 5 years of a lot of different things. I've worked for the Park Service for quite a while. I started in 1967, and I've worked in a number of parks, mostly in the west and the north. This is the furthest south I've ever lived, so this is a new world for me, and I'm very happy to be here. We moved here not with the Park Service. We moved on our own to retire and never got around to it. So the monument itself, as you know, was private land, but more importantly, this land has been used and is still used by the local Wabanaki for at least 10,000 years, probably more. So as a federal government, we recognize that the boundaries of the homeland of the Penobscot, and are still used today by all Wabanaki tribes, the Passamaquoddy, the Micmac, the Maliseet, and the Penobscot. And as the Park Service, the National Park Service and the Monument are consistent, substantive dialogue with all the federally recognized governments in the spirit of shared interest and conservation goals. And that's a duty that we have, and we take that very seriously. So I just remember that this land is and has continued to be used by people all the time, and we are very sympathetic to that. As we started in the monument, and this monument was proclaimed in the Antiquities Act. I suspect that somebody may ask what the difference between a monument and a park is, and we can go over that if that comes up. I'm not going to take that time now. Management-wise, there's very little difference when that happens. Legislatively, there can be quite a difference. So when we started to know this land and what was going on, we had public meetings. I think the very first public meeting we had was in Stacyville, where we had 185 people show up about a week, 2 weeks after we started. And we've continued that as we've worked through the framework for management, which is a management plan for the monument, which many of you have participated in. So that is almost done. That comes up, it's usage. Basically, it's a framework for management. It is what's basically should be developed here and there. We have not developed much at all on purpose until that framework has been completed. We have consistently tried to get more and more people in. I think one of the biggest things that went on before I quit my introduction was getting signs up the interstate, where I really hope to see what difference those signs would made. They got up in 2019 in November, and COVID hit in 2020, so I have no idea what those signs meant for people. We did see an increase last year, which we can talk about, and we've seen an increase every year. So I welcome you to this. I thank everyone for the BDN and the friends for putting this together, and I look forward to fielding whatever comes out of there. And thank you very much. Joe?
Well, now I think we're going over to Andrew or Lindsay.
I'm happy to go. My name is Andrew Bossie. I have the distinct pleasure and honor to be the executive director of Friends of Katahdin Woods and Waters. I started here about a year after Tim started. The Friends of Katahdin Woods and Waters is the official philanthropic partner to Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument. So obviously Tim and his team are on the government side, and we are on a nonprofit side where we're raising funds for a margin of excellence in the park beyond what public funds can do on their own. Our community is bound together by a belief in the power of nature and our own community to transform lives. And I come from a background of policy before I came into conservation and community development. I worked on policy issues at the ballot box and in the State House. And while running the other day, I was like, our means and our ends are always community in all of this work when it comes to nonprofits. And that is certainly true with Friends. Our work falls into three major categories right now. We support visitation. We do that through providing materials to the public, both printed. You may have seen the Loop Road Map or our Dark Sky Guide. We also provide those through our website as well, friendsofkww.org. There's all kinds of materials there, in addition to the services that the Park Service can provide you in helping plan a trip. And we also hold events that encourage visitation, like the anniversary celebration that's coming up on the 21st of August, just 10 days, I think, away. We also, the second pillar of our work is infrastructure. We provide office space for the Park Service to work in right now, as well as visitor contact stations in both Millinocket and Patton, where visitors can come and orient themselves about a trip into the monument. We also help a little bit with road grading and plowing. This year, we're excited to help with some additional maintenance staff after blowdowns this winter to clear trails. And as we'll talk about later, new infrastructure projects like tent sites and other things like that. The third area of our work is in our mission is not only supporting Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument, but baked into our why we exist is also the surrounding communities and a belief in raising the aspirations of individuals and communities that are connected to this monument. The primary thrust of our work there is through our youth programs that engage schools locally and from afar in using the monument with the Park Service as an education tool to discover that power of nature and community in their work. We also support trail crews in that regard. So as Tim mentioned, this park was born out of philanthropy when Roxanne Quimby and Lucas St. Clair, their family, donated these lands to the federal government to make this. And what Friends is here to do is to really continue building that philanthropic community for a margin of excellence beyond what's possible without it. We're 930 members strong as of this evening, and with your help, we may be even closer to that 1,000 member mark. And I'm just so grateful to be here. Thank you, Joe Allen, for having us.
Absolutely. Lindsay, can you say a few words about yourself as well?
Sure. So my name is Lindsay Downing. I grew up here in Mount Chase. My parents were in Mount Chase Lodge as I was growing up, and I can tell you that I never in a million years expected to be coming back to run this business. That was by far the furthest thing from what I expected that I would do with my life. Went away to school. I went to Plymouth State University in New Hampshire and really got the itch to travel. And I started traveling around a lot, finding a lot of jobs where I could get paid to go places. And I saw the whole country that way. It was really, really pretty neat. And it seemed that every job that I picked up, no matter what it was, whether it was outdoor education or or if I was working out at a lodge, they were all centered around some kind of national monument or park. And that was pretty easy to see that the communities around these national parks and monuments were thriving. All of the businesses that I worked for were all privately owned. And it really kind of opened my eyes to the benefits of having that designation, the national park designation. So I traveled for a lot of years and I saw a lot of different national parks. I've been all over the West and up in Alaska. I was fortunate enough to meet my husband working here in the state of Maine, thankfully. I didn't have to convince him to move too far. But he and I went up and worked for a lodge in Seward, Alaska, Kenai Fjords Glacier Lodge. And it was right in the middle of a national park. And that was really incredible because it was so remote and people would spend so much money to get out to this little lodge that was very nice, but it wasn't anything over the top, and that was kind of where it sparked our interest. Like, wow, Mount Chase Lodge, we really could run a place like that. And that was maybe 2012. So the national park hadn't really become a conversation at that point. And we were at that point 23 years old. So not really thinking about long-term plans at that point. As the years ticked on, we kind of decided that we really liked the Katahdin region and we kept planning our life around ways to get back to the Katahdin region for short trips. And around that time, there was talk of a national park or monument. And at the time it was a national park. So we really fell into the right place at the right time kind of thing. My parents had been here for 40 years. They were ready to kind of turn over the reins and we were ready to kind of settle down. And we really knew that we had a hunch that the monument was going to be designated. We weren't for sure. Nobody was for sure, but we could see the growth that could happen if that designation was to come to fruition. And sure enough, it did. And so we purchased the lodge pretty much on a hunch that we were going to have a national monument or park in our backyard. And that was really what kind of got us across the finish line, because the Katahdin region really, as many of you are probably aware, has gone through a lot of changes in the last 10 years with the mills going out and, the economy sort of flushing all over the place. But yeah, so my husband and I have been running Mount Chase Lodge. We purchased it from my parents in 2016. In February of 2016, the monument was designated in August. And every year since that year has just been better than the last, even through the pandemic. A ton of people really kind of used that as their excuse to get outside and stay local in the state of Maine. And we didn't have the crowds, we weren't Bar Harbor. There wasn't a ton of people everywhere you looked, and people really appreciated that about this area. And it's been so wonderful to be a part of it from the very beginning and see the growth every year, and to see it all come together has been a really, really special thing for me as I have grown up, born in Millinocket, raised at Mount Chase Lodge, and here I am running the business. And so I've seen it through the whole kit and caboodle. So
that's so exciting, Lindsay. It says, what a great example of being in the right place at the right time and saying yes to an opportunity at just the right moment. Like, how many of those do you get in your life, right?
Many.
So I would really like to circle back to something that I think it was Andy mentioned, which was community and how the community develops around the monument. And I'd love to hear from all of you about how community for you and your experience of community has evolved over the first 5 years of Katahdin Woods and Waters. And of course, also, we can't have that conversation without talking about COVID. Whoever wants to jump in.
Well, I can start, I guess. That community, a lot of the Park Service people, this is not an island. We don't look at this as an island. We look at this integrated with with the communities around here, and it's all the communities, not just one in particular. And a lot of what I think goes on is that we have tried, and I think the communities have, is to move forward, step by step rather than grandiose splashes, because you don't really want to go backward. And I think that growth is showing up. The communities, as we develop, our development plans are not for big things in the monument. They're to be supported from outside, and that's why you want to make the roads aren't, to my mind, are never going to be paved. So even though some people may want that, this is part of the experience here and part of the experience of the woods. The park is not an island, and so we want the communities involved. We want all the communities to thrive together with that as we all grow. And we've been seeing about 10% a year, which is to me a lot better than seeing 70% and then everything fall apart. So that's one of our goals, is to keep moving forward steadily in concert with everyone in the Katahdin region. And some of the things that, even though we are a night dark sky sanctuary, the whole Katahdin region, if you look at our Katahdin, where all the cities, all the towns got together, and these are the things that can make the communities work. And it's not one community versus another, it's an area. And I think that is very powerful for around here. And I think we love to continue to be a part of that.
I unmuted myself, and I don't see Lindsay unmuting herself. So
Go for it, Andy.
yeah, cool. So I came to this place as a recreator, and like I said, I was involved in politics before this, but I came looking for these scenes behind me. This is actually one of the lesser visited parts of Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument. This is from the lookout, which is probably best to have a bike to get to this place. And you can always contact us to find more information. But when I came into this work, it was clear to me that community would need to be here. Like I said earlier, it was philanthropy that made this park happen, and compromise and controversy that many of you are probably familiar with was brokered through community. And so really I see our charge here as continuing that work of building community. And what that involves is, yes, partners like the National Park Service and donors, which I think everyone thinks about, but it also includes volunteers that make those youth programs happen, or that can help clean up trails that MPS needs help with. It also can include folks that give their intellectual property. I'm so glad that Tim just mentioned the Wabanaki. I'll be honest, when I came to this work, I thought I was going to go out hiking and paddling and just raising tons of money. I thought I was leaving social justice. But what has become really clear to me in this work is that who has access to land and how that's parsed out is a social justice issue. I'm not leaving. Good conservation is about making sure the land is available to everyone as it's supposed to be as part of the United States government. So we've been really leaning into our work with, the first people, the ancestors of this place for 11,000 years this has been occupied by Wabanaki people and nations. And the unique thing about the monument is that those people, the descendants of those people, are still here today. Wabanaki people are in the state of Maine, and that's not true for so many national park units on the East Coast. So we're committed to continuing to centering Wabanaki voice and learning the true history of what happened in this land. And that's part of the community that's been building and has been a really exciting part for me. You mentioned COVID, Joe, and everyone's been talking about the pivots you had to make. And I talked about all those materials. Well, in the pandemic, at first, we were all in our own homes, not leaving. And so what we worked really hard to do over the past 15, 16 months was to bring the monument to people through webinars like this, or radio shows, other virtual gatherings. We moved our events online, or to participate on your own. And we've also had to do that with things like the Katahdin Learning Project. We were having literally hundreds of kids come in and have experiences in the monument, and we had to pivot. We first provided support to parents and teachers, and then we were eventually able to go to schools and bring the monument to schools and teaching there. So it's been an interesting 4 years, 5 years of the monument coming right up, but 4 years of the Friends group, or at least my time with it, and kind of building this community and watching it grow and evolve. And then also dealing with kind of the punches that, things like COVID are providing us.
Mhm.
How we can kind of pivot and maneuver through those things.
Tim, what about you from the perspective of a park ranger from inside the park? What does community look like there?
Well, it looks very much like Andy talked about with the many facets of it, certainly with the Wabanaki, but also the local users and our neighbors in there. With you've got a combination of private landowners working for us. You've got unlike a lot of parks, we have hunting and snowmobiling in part of it. We have parts that don't allow it, so you can get out of that. You can get out of and do what you kind of pick what you want to do, and you can do it. The community though is huge. The COVID here, I mean, many of the people that I talk to, this park is unlike almost any park in this region. It's more like a Western park. But COVID, we could social distance easily. The trails, or lots of them, are double track. They were easy to get people on. We did not have to go through the extreme measures that other did. We had, for the rest of the world, we had a fairly normal year of people coming up, because we didn't have the huge crowds. Now they start to build. Last year, our busiest day was actually at the end of September during leaf season, and we actually had to direct traffic at the overlook, which is the first time we've ever had to do that. Of course, it only holds about 8 cars, and we're working on, that's an expansion that we wanted to do there to make it safer and a better visitation. But COVID here, being this far up, was not like you read about in the rest of the cities. We didn't have the vandalism that people had. We weren't overrun with, frankly, it was far enough away from urban areas. We didn't get some of the problems that some of the more wild areas in the Park Service closer to other towns saw. Huge influxes of people that, in the good side, had never been to a park before. On the bad side, they had no idea in some respects what they were coming to. So in that part, we were fortunate, and we would like to keep that growing. But that we do have room, and I think that's one of the pluses, where you can get away here and do different activities that you would like to do all in one spot. Not to mention all the other activities you can do in the entire community. If you want to go whitewater rafting, you go somewhere else. Those are all available here. We're just another piece of something to do. We are not seeing ourselves as the center of everything. We see us as a participant.
Thank you. There are a number of questions that are starting to pepper in through the chat, but I feel like we do need to go back to something that you raised earlier, Tim, and that what is the difference between a park and a monument? You said that it's not a management differentiation, but it's a legislative differentiation. But I'm going to add another layer to that. And someone just emailed in a question. She said, I'm not sure, I'm still very concerned about the designation of a national monument and not a national park. Could the next president reverse the designation and turn it over to private ownership? So there are a lot of layers there within that. I want to understand the difference between a park and a monument, but then also understand, is there any risk or risk to the designation?
So a national park has to be legislated. So it has to come up through Congress. A national monument can be legislated, or it can be proclaimed from the Antiquities Act of 1906. So if it's legislated, then you've got legislation with it that says XYZ. It's done by Congress. This park was proclaimed by the Antiquities Act of 1906, and it was not. And many parks have started off that way. It's a proclamation park. In Montessori, the Acadia, which is now Acadia, in its third name, started off as a monument that way. Grand Canyon. So a lot of them started in that direction. and what happens then with the proclamation, the proclamation for this park, the proclamation, which is about 8 or 10 pages long, talks about all the attributes of the park. So the attributes are there just like the monument, whether it's to be a National Park Service area. And then with this, then it reverts back to, for us, what's in the deeds that came with the monument, and what legislation, what our policies are. And in that respect, those policies are the same, whether it's a national park or a national monument. The differences may be in that pieces of the legislation for a park can be very specific, or a monument that is legislated very specific. So what we have here is basically policy. And for one of the reasons we don't have the authority to lease or buy. The park itself doesn't have the ability to lease or a building outside the park. That's why the Friends do that for us to work out of, because we don't want to be in the park year round because it's snowed in. So, and it has other uses. So that's the main difference. As for the Antiquities Act, this park was reviewed, and it was in 2017, and basically recommendation was to leave it. There's lots of, I'm not going to go into all the talking heads. You can probably get any answer you want about whether it can go or not, depending on whom you're talking to. The best thing is it would be extremely difficult. This park, this monument is much different than most places that the Park Service has were public land somewhere along the line. They were a military reservation, they were BLM land, they were city parks, there was some kind of government. This one is quite unusual that it was private land donated. And it's really, I think, entertaining or intriguing is that the history of the establishment of Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument and how Baxter came to be are very similar. And so that is that's always intriguing, which I learned when I got here. This park, this monument is much like, I'm like Lindsay. I came here from Alaska, and so I've worked in the West in bigger parks, and so it's much like a Western park in many respects, as opposed to many of the parks in this region, which are either many battlefields and historic sites. We have a different genre here, and it's quite familiar to me. These kind of what we're doing here, as opposed to me working in a battlefield. That would be a little different for me.
So in the poll, it looked like about 40% of the people said that the people in the room right now say that they have not been to the park yet, which is a plurality and exciting, since I know that all three of you are in the welcoming business. And so, what can you say to encourage folks to come to the park and to the monument? And also that in the chat, a lot of the questions have to do with, what do I need to know about the new campsites? Can I get a newer map? Where should I stay? Obviously, Lindsay, you have an answer to that question. What do you want to tell folks who haven't been to the to the monument yet?
Well, one of the first things I don't want to hog the conversation. One of the first things I ask is, what do you like to do? Because we can lead you to different places, and that's the first thing I ask. If about 40%, almost 50% of the people that come in go and do the Katahdin Loop Road and get the views of Katahdin and have short walks, and about 35-40% go up north, which is extremely completely different experience. So we do encourage people to come in, if they're not here the first time, to get a lay of the land. The Loop Road is probably where initially we would take them up, the Swift Brook Road, and come in and do that. But if they're interested in specific things, we get people, I want to do a night sky, I want to ride my bike. The mountain biking up here with these logging roads in the glacial till is really good. There's no unlike other places, we don't have mud holes, we don't have resource issues with that, so it's extremely good on the old in the glacial till to be riding bikes. So I'll quit and let Andy and Lindsay talk about. But the first thing I always ask is, what are you really interested in? And then you can start to, because we do have, it's not just one thing here. It's whether you want to be on the river, you want to hike, etc.
Before we pass it over to Andy and to Lindsay on that, what I want to know and what we can pass on to everyone who's here today so that you guys can get the information is what you're saying. It sounds like, what we need is a flow chart. Like, what do you want to do? I want to bike. And then it's like, okay, well, what are the resources you need? Is there a place on the web that has this information that we can just point people to?
Well, I know
we
the
have
park.
some on our web, and Andy's got a more robust web than we do at this point.
Well, I'm glad Tim mentioned all of those things, and I'm going to drop in the chat right now. Oh, thanks, Ginny, for putting the MPS website. That's the best one to have. And then I just put our visit page that has all kinds of materials around that. The other thing I would say is I was a backpacker that turned into a paddler on the east branch of the Penobscot River. Miles and miles of uninterrupted houses. Most days you won't even see other people. So one of the extraordinary assets about this national monument is the 3 waterways that move through it and the paddling opportunities for people of all levels. So definitely check out those resources. Go to the visitor contact stations in Patton and Millinocket if you're on your way through, and do that. Joe, do you want me to talk about the campsites here a little bit?
Sure.
All right. So speaking of the river and speaking about driving, Friends has been really excited to work with philanthropic partners in the Park Service to expand camping opportunities in Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument. We worked with support from LL Bean, the National Park Foundation, and the Roxanne Quimby Foundation to build 5 single sites at the area of Lungsus Camps, which is along the east branch of the Penobscot River, but you can also drive there by car. And then there's also 2 group sites, and those have been officially opened. The Park Service is their first come, first serve right now, but that might change in the future. But it's a really exciting development that's made possible because of the power of philanthropy. And if you're part of the 60% on this poll that have visited the monument, one of the top things we kept hearing back was we want more overnight accommodations. And so we were able to deliver on that. And there are many other great projects in the hopper that we're really excited to be unveiling in the future months and years ahead. But that one in particular, we're really excited. They're really awesome campsites.
Yes, and the 7, when they come on board, we actually receive them on Friday coming up. They're still, the actual donation is actually Friday. So they are open now, however. The 7 sites, before they came on, we had 5 places where you could drive your car and go to a campsite. That was it. There was many in the backcountry and along the river, but 5. So, we got 7 more. That more than doubles it. Not a big number, but that's a huge piece. And we do get, we don't get a lot of crowding yet because there aren't many sites, but this should, when Andy came and said, what do we need around here? I said, we need some campsites. So that was one thing that could be done.
So for folks who don't want to camp, but still want to visit the park, Lindsay, could you, obviously you're, representing Mount Chase Lodge. Could you talk a little bit about what the lodge is like and also talk about, what are the non-camping options for folks in the region?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mount Chase Lodge is situated more on the northern end of the National Monument. So we're about 17 miles from the north entrance, which is about 18 miles from the north entrance of Baxter State Park. So it's really convenient to go to both parks while you're here, which is really has been a wonderful addition for us to be able to say to our guests exactly what you were saying, Joe. Is like, what is it that you're interested in doing? Oh, you want a bike? Great, I have a great bike path for you in the National Monument. Oh, you want to swim? Perfect. Go to Baxter State Park. Go to South Branch Pond for a day. So we're very close to like I said, the north end, probably about 20 miles. And our lodge is situated on the shore of Upper Shin Pond. And we have 4 cabins that are just like private little cabins that you can rent. They all vary in size. Some of them are really equipped with kitchen facilities and whatnot. Others are really Maine-y and just basic log cabins with comfortable beds and a roof over your head. So it really depends on what kind of accommodations you're looking for. We also have suites in our main lodge that we just renovated last year. Due to COVID, we kind of gutted the whole lodge and put rooms in to make sure everybody had private bathrooms, which that was kind of a big deal for us. And not only was it because of COVID, but people coming to the area are more and more. There are more and more people who are looking for private accommodations. So so that happened. So we're right here on the water. I'm overlooking probably 4 different parties right now, taking canoes out on the shore. We have canoes and kayaks for people to take out right here. We serve meals by reservation. We work real hard to put a great meal on the table for our guests. And it's a much different experience than almost anywhere else you'd go. You sit in a room, and again, COVID has made things a little bit different, but you sit in a room and you eat meals with the other guests who are here, and it's just such a different experience than you would get anywhere else in the world, where you go sit at your restaurant table and don't talk to anybody, eat your food and get up and leave. This is really a communal sort of experience, and that's really what it is. It's a dining experience and just a lodge experience, a Maine Woods experience. So,
Yeah.
So that's what we have to offer. There are also lots of other places around that offer similar things. Shimpon Village is just up the road from us. They have private cabins as well. Madigan and Wilderness is right at the entrance of the north end. You can't get much closer. They're right on the east branch of the Penobscot River, and they offer campsites and cabins. Bradford House in Patton is another one that's kind of a smaller scale. They just have a couple rooms, but there are lots of places to come up and stay, and lots of different overnight accommodations, different experiences, no matter where you go. But we would love to tout our horn here. We think it's a pretty special place. So.
It sounds like it. You mentioned some of the adaptations that you've made, Lindsay, during COVID. I'm really curious to hear from you and also Andrew and Tim. But are there things that you've learned during the pandemic with regards to the monument, with regards to how you welcome people to the monument, and also just how people want to relate to each other, that you think you're going to keep doing? What lessons have you taken from the last year and a half of sudden change?
Oh man, the biggest lesson that we took is like, just adapt. Like, don't kick your feet. Don't, you just have to learn to adapt to what's going on in the world. And, we went through some really hard times here. We were very scared at the very beginning, and it was pretty clear that we weren't allowed to have overnight guests. So we decided, hey, we can serve food. So we started cooking food for people in town and dropping it off at their doors. And we never came within 10 feet of anybody. And, people were really excited to have a home cooked meal that they didn't have to cook, because that was the time. That sort of fizzled out a little bit as restaurants started opening up slowly. And we adapted to outdoor dining. Which is something we never would have done, because it's just a lot more work for us to serve a meal outside versus in the dining room. But we weren't comfortable having people in the dining room, so we said, okay, let's get some nice picnic tables, and we have this amazing waterfront. And so we started doing outdoor dining, and we're like, how well it's gone, and what a cool, as if dining experience here was cool as it was, but now you can do it outside, and it's just it's very cool. On a nice evening, there's nothing better than getting served a nice salmon dinner outside. So that's something that we really appreciated from last year, and we're carrying forward with it, and trying to figure out how to do it more efficiently. So, among other things.
I think one of the things that we've done, and I see it in the chat, is technology. The National Park Service app of where to go, where you don't need a cell phone, has been really important. The one big change that we saw was the huts, where we had shared bunk space, where we had to shut that down, and it's still as we run through the variants here. That is probably going to stay more of a take the whole cabin as we get back into, rather than, one spot we had 16 people that could be unrelated staying there. That's not in the cards anytime soon. And as I think Andy alluded to, we have had lots of requests of people, I want to come, but unless I'm guaranteed a spot, I'm reluctant to come a long ways. And so we are about ready, and we've gone out with a public notice with this, and about ready to go onto the National Park reservation system for campsites and things, where they won't all be reservations, but there'll be some, which is the same. Every national park in the service has that, so people start to expect that as we start to grow here.
Very cool. We have a question from one person in the chat that I want to make sure we get to, so I'm just going to hit it right now. Lori says that I'm mobility challenged and I drive a Prius. Is there any part of the monument available to me and to my vehicle?
Yes, it's the Swiftbrook Road. We invite Priuses in on the main roads, which are the Swiftbrook Road, the North Road, and now most of the American Thread Road, which is a more undeveloped section. But come to the Loop Road, you can get around the Loop Road. We have many Priuses come in. You will have to take your time in some spots. We have one accessible trail that goes to Lynx Pond. It's fully accessible for wheelchair. The new vault toilets we have are all accessible toilets. There's 5 of them we put around the monument to be able to go to use that. And as we keep progressing, we also have the campsite that just got put in. One of those is a fully accessible campsite, accessible parking area, accessible to the campsite and to the vault toilet there at Lux Sioux. So yes, and it's a step at a time here, but with that is we look at all those possibilities whenever we can, and those are the ones that have been done so far.
Oh, thank you for that answer, Tim. Another question, which I think is probably for you, Tim. One person is asking, has there been any thought about purchasing additional land in an effort to separate the visitors from the logging trucks?
So we don't have authority in the monument proclamation. There is no provision to just go out and buy land. If there's a willing seller on the boundary, we can look at it, but we do not go out, and we are not. That is not within our charge to do that. If something comes up that somebody wants to willingly take for instance, when the monument was started to be proclaimed, if you look at the proclamation, there's actually 93,000 acres in the proclamation, and we only have 87,000 acres. There's 2 pieces of property in the legislation that the owner said, I wanted to put it in here so that those we could purchase without any other legislation. But other than that, this is not a situation where we go out and actively try and get land. There's no even the hint of eminent domain in here. That is not at all where we're at, and we respect our neighbors' rights. As that's private land, they have rights, and we work very closely with the timber industry and to promote safety in there, which is one of our primary concerns, as is theirs.
Thank you for that. We have one person in the chat who's asking about a visitor center. Is that something that's in the cards for the National Monument?
Well,
so
go ahead, Tim.
Parks typically with contact centers and visitor centers, they come usually at about the 10-year mark. So they're not usually put out. We have the contact centers in Millinocket and in Patton at this point. But typically in Park Service, a big contact center, a big visitor center. And as we've looked at it, a lot of the public meetings, the big visitor center with that the traditional visitor center, more and more of the younger people are not, they're more technologically attached than than certainly when I was a child. The visitor centers and the exhibits and things like that, we would look in this to be partnering on the exterior with that outside the park, so that and you can learn about different things. But like I said, typically in a new area, the big infrastructure like that does not usually come along right away. Andy?
You got it. There's lots of projects that we're working on right now. Some of them are ready
We
to come
are.
out proper, and some of them aren't. So
Yeah, like I already mentioned, one that we were high up on the list is the parking there at the viewpoint and getting that. There's an accessible toilet there on a hill, which doesn't work out so well. So we have a design, and hopefully we're working with Andy on that to get that so about 30 cars can park there, and we'll have a better experience at that spot.
So while we're talking about cars, we're talking about infrastructure. There's also some legislation that's happening in DC right now that's about infrastructure. I'm curious, does any of that, does any of the funding coming from the federal government through this infrastructure package, or even the American Rescue Plan, does any of that come to the parks, parks and national monuments for creation of infrastructure? Is that is there anything there for the national monument?
At the first stage of that, they were looking heavily at projects in the $20 million category. So you're going to see places like Acadia, and this is all predicated a lot on deferred maintenance, that people have huge problems with infrastructure falling down. So the first piece of that money is going to go to those, the old 80-20 rule, where they're going to try and put that money and get the things done with that. In the second go around, which will be in a few years, then there'll be projects that would come, and we are actively looking in the future of that for some specific ones. I mean, specifically those of you that have driven into the Loop Road, the Swiftbrook Road would be way up there to get it to much more easily maintainable than it is, and some of those type infrastructure. That also comes out in some of the things in the framework. But they are looking for, at this point, large mega projects with high dollar values.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from, frankly, the work it takes to do a $20 million project and put it together and contract and everything else is not that much more than a $100,000 project. So they're trying to get that money out. But as those things get going, we are queuing up for the second round in the under $5 million ones that should come out of that in the next few years.
Great. Thank you for that, Tim. Now, I have a question from, I sort of lost track of who asked it in the chat, but I always want to make sure that we pull out any questions that are either from kids or are about kids, because I want to make sure that we include their voices. So someone, maybe a kid, wants to know, do you have a junior ranger program? And if you don't, is it coming?
We have the rudiments of one, and we are working on it to get it more robust. We have not had much staff. Andy has been helping with that too, and we have the pieces of it going in, and a lot of the literature is in process. So that is coming. We get that question quite a bit.
If kids want to get involved, what do you tell them? Where do we send them? I'm mostly asking so I can tease this information out and send it back out in the email that we send after the event.
Well, we have some brochures. We do I know Andy talk about that. We place-based learning with the schools. We've been very active with the Friends doing that and helping us with that as they come in. We have some small pieces in there right now of the pieces of the Junior Ranger program, but we don't have the formal one done yet.
I would just tag on to that. If you're a teacher or a parent, and maybe one of my colleagues can kind of throw this in here if my computer's not cooperating, but the Katahdin Learning Project, we have a website. We also have a Facebook page that talks about some of the opportunities that youth can have with the Friends. Thank you very much, William. There, and those two trail crews, we've partnered with Baxter Youth Conservation Corps in the past. That's been put on pause during the pandemic, but we hope to bring that partnership with trail crews in the monument back, as well as the work we're doing with Wabanaki Youth in Science on an ancestral lands trail crew that is a partnership between WAYS, Wabanaki Youth in Science, Friends, and MPS. So those are some great opportunities. There's also some events. Stars Over Katahdin is coming up. I changed my background a little bit later. That will come up in probably early October, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention right now, at least up here in the Katahdin region, I hear it's soggy down south, but the skies are clear. It's the new moon, and we are about to go into the peak of the Perseids meteor shower. So get out there if you can get to Katahdin Woods and Water, some of the darkest skies east of the Mississippi. And that's good for all ages, but our Stars Over Katahdin event often has and will, I think this year, have a very big youth component as well.
Awesome. That is super exciting. Andy, I have to say, hearing you talk about it, it's just making me want to just close the computer, just get in the car and go right now.
I just got to share a story. I took friends out last summer during COVID on the river, and we were camping overnight. It was like 10 o'clock, and our eyes had adjusted to the light, and they were down by the river, and they were doing. I got close to them, and I'm like, "What are you doing? Why are you crouched down by the river?" And they're saying it's a moonless night. They're like, "We can see the shadow of our hand being cast from the Milky Way above." That's pretty incredible. Wow. Not a lot of places in the world where you can do that.
That is incredible. Wow.
Speaking of community, that night sky designation, that sanctuary designation, that is the power of community coming together. It was, yes, the Park Service has that designation, but all kinds of people across the state and across the country really contributed in making Katahdin Woods and Waters the 12th dark sky sanctuary in the entirety of the world.
That is pretty incredible. That is pretty incredible. And yet another way in which Maine is like the west of the East. We have these wild spaces that most of the rest of the East Coast cannot claim. And that makes us unique. And we get to celebrate that in a place like the National Monument. So we have so many questions in the chat. We're not going to get to all of them. Ooh, the best of the East. I like that. Isn't there like a Dr. Seuss story? What was it? The Beast of the East? Not the same thing. So we have a lot of questions we're not going to get to. We will compile so many of the links and references that were mentioned in the chat and over the course of the conversation, and send those out in an email to everyone, so you don't have to try to copy and paste right now. And thank you everyone for being very generous with your Googling and dropping in the links. I really appreciate it. We have just a few minutes before the end of the conversation. I'm curious, Andy, Lindsay, and Tim, for those folks who haven't made it to the National Monument yet, what do you want them to know that we haven't talked about yet?
The leaves are going to be out this year. That's what I want you to know. I think we're going to have a great foliage season this year for sure. It's a fantastic time to come up.
I was going to say that what we haven't talked about is, there's lots of natural and cultural resources in the monument that we haven't touched on. The geology, the International Appalachian Trail that goes to the geological end of the Appalachians in Morocco, Africa. That usually piques somebody's adventurous streak, and it starts there. It starts in the monument. But the pitches and the wildlife, we have a lot of come up at 4 a.m. There's many birders come up. We have a huge bird population. We have a very large bird population, and people coming up to do that. So that's one of the things I think. If you want to do it, ask it or look on the app, and you probably can find your spot here in the Katahdin area. It may not be just us, but certainly we are a contributor to that.
I would be remiss. Like I said earlier, I was a hiker turned paddler, and now since I've taken this job, all of those things that Tim just mentioned and the leaves, I have become a birder, and now I'm really interested in flora and fauna, and so I've got my books and bird app to like listen to them. And like, it's really, really cool. I think the thing that people should know about visiting this park that we haven't talked about, or the future of it, is this is a very rare opportunity that a national park unit has been created in our lifetimes. Many of them were created 100 years ago, if you think of Acadia. And so when you visit here, it is a park in its infancy. This was private land. It was logged mostly. And so expect a rustic experience, and be prepared before you go in with a plan. Talk to Tim and his staff, or call the friends, or stay with someone like Lindsay, who is knowledgeable about this place. And what you have an opportunity to do is, all of these great places were started by, oftentimes we give credit to an individual like Percival Baxter, who was tenacious in creating Baxter State Park, or the Rockefellers, or the Doors in Acadia National Park. But this is your chance to stand up a new unit of the National Park Service and be part of the community. The misnomer about all of that is it takes all of us. It takes the federal government, it takes private businesses, and it takes philanthropic individuals and organizations to make great places like Acadia, like Grand Canyon, like Yellowstone. And what you have an opportunity here to do is be on the ground floor of making history. Visit, come back, see it again, get engaged, volunteer, donate, all of that.
Awesome. I feel like this is a pretty great wrap up. Thank you, Andy. And thank you for being here, everyone. And thank you to Tim, Lindsay, and Andy for giving us a peek into the monument's evolution and the evolution of the community around the monument tonight. So everyone who's here, look for an email from us in the next few days with links to sites mentioned in the panel and a link for tickets to the 5th anniversary celebration event of the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument, which will be presented by Friends of Katahdin Woods and Waters and Maine Beer Company on Saturday, August 21st from 5 to 9 p.m. at Shin Pond Village. And tomorrow, we will be choosing 2 people at random from the registrant list who will each get 2 tickets each to that celebration. And the winners will be notified by email by 5 p.m. tomorrow. So everyone will get an email with all the links, and a couple very lucky people will receive another email with a surprise. So thank you, everybody. And I'm trying to honor the 7 o'clock hard stop. And I think that we'll call it a night.
Thank you. Come see us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.